Welcome to Hilarity by Default's weekly Brisco County Jr. review, starring the lucky chin of Bruce Campbell. After Brisco and Bowler are ambushed while protecting a stagecoach full of money, they head to Reno, where they discover Dixie Cousin's sister, Dolly, mixed up with a crooked casino mob out to squash their thriving business. Together with Socrates, Dixie, and Whip Morgan, the gang pool their resources together to take down the Godfather of the West in episode 23, Wild Card. Shenanigans abound with exploding champagne bottles, feathery burlesque, card shark duplicity, and bathing beauty voyeurism.
Yeah, well, especially in Demos's case, here comes Dixie Cummings? Wait, Collins? Wait, Cousins? Cousins, that's it.
I wouldn't love her like a cousin. I'll just
You'd love her as not a cousin.
Well, what did you think of Wild Card?
I had a lot of fun with it, Demos. Wild Card's a good episode. I have to admit we're back in the quality intro category, though granted it's a lot less silly, and I like what they did with the intro in particular. You can tell they do enough with the mask in the open for you to tell that it's Dixie, but can believe that nobody else in the moment can figure it out. Because listen, for all Bowler's flaws or whatever, if he were that close, he would have been able to spot Dixie's pair of eyes, so to speak. And well, of course, Brisco can.
I did enjoy this episode very much. I think there's some weaknesses here, but there are a lot of strengths and some very particular strengths. But before we jump into it, there are a lot of characters here, and I kind of want to break them down before we start talking about plot and good and bad and so forth. First off, what was your take on the return of Dixie and the introduction of Hello Dolly Cousins?
Listen, this is in the spirit of those silly musical style puns that we've come to know and love in the Brisco County Jr. series. They named her Dolly Cousins. It's an allusion to her being a singer, with Dolly Parton being a particular figure back in that time. Granted, she was in the twilight at that point.
Or the musical Hello Dolly.
And then thank you, while also referencing the musical Hello Dolly. Thank you, Demos.
Hello, Dolly.
She was going to be, at least in my view, probably a limited use character who was going to be there for the purpose of giving the third party point of view perspective of Demos's loyalty to Dixie. What my mind started to form when I saw Dolly is she would be the confirmation of feeling and devotion that Dixie would get. But then again, in this relationship, for me, the question mark always was Dixie. She was the one of the pair that was far more ambitious.
I mean, I love Dixie. I've already mentioned her in numerous episodes of how much I like her. I think that in this episode, she's about the same. There's nothing really brand new about her here other than, oh, here's the sister we never mentioned. Oh, I thought you grew up in an orphanage. I thought you grew up with the nuns and all. Okay, whatever. What really surprised me about this episode, honestly, is Whip Morgan. And I really did actually like his character in this as opposed to Hard Rock. I think he worked a lot better here, and for the first time ever, the team up between Whip and Brisco momentarily actually works, especially when they pull the double act against the Tataglia goons mid-conversation. I thought that was an excellent scene, and I think they really pumped up his strengths and kind of decimated some of his faults.
You know, because I felt like they had opportunity to plan Whip Morgan being in the episode. They had figured out that this Nevada chump was a dork and didn't want him, and started to really form Whip Morgan better than what they think they wanted. I think that's why you got a better Whip. But really, voyeurism becomes masochism for me in your mind if you actually think this guy's a meaningful character. I did not.
I'm not going to go that far. I just said that I enjoyed him more in this episode.
Okay, well, in that case, you are adhering to what I would say is the ugly friend at the club defense. I'm going to bring my ugliest friend to the club and look handsome by association. It's the same reason why, hey, is that why you always invited me out with you? Anyways, from that standpoint, yeah, I think you're right. But I mean, in all seriousness, the only way remaining for Whip in my mind was up, unless they change his name to Nevada. I think I know why the character is named Whip, and I'm sure it was at the behest of an executive, because if the show is trying to evoke Indiana Jones type feelings at points, there's no way the writers can sneak in a criticism by way of Bowler, because he won't be able to say "not that darn whip again" in a show that's trying to be like Indiana Jones.
Oh my God, I never thought about that. Brisco found his whip.
You already have plenty of awesome guest panelists. We did not need Whip to be injected as starting to look like he's a mainstay, possibly. No.
In fact, I think you're right. There are definitely too many characters, and there is one character that kind of suffers from the onslaught of all these additions, and in this episode, it's Bowler. He falls to the wayside. The one character I really did love in this, although he has a very, very small but very loud role, and I don't necessarily mean loud by the sound of his voice. I'm talking about Enzio Tartaglia, the Godfather himself. Yes, it's a parody, but dare I say a well-meaning one.
If you like the use of parody for the Elvis sheriff, so to speak, you'll enjoy what they did with the West Mafia adaptation that they put in play here, right? The Western, Mafia Western piece. Actually, does that mean that would be called a spaghetti Western? Anyway.
If there's one thing that I straight up do not think worked well at all, it's the romantic quadrangle between Dolly, Whip, Brisco, and Dixie. It never works. It feels quite forced. And especially it feels that way because it all culminates to the status quo that was established before the beginning of the episode. That didn't work. It felt a lot like padding. And if we want to talk about padding, let's add to the fact Socrates' gambling addiction PSA. It never pays off. It's a detriment to the character and the story. And it's too insignificant of a plot point for it to leave any impact and only endures as an unnecessary distraction.
I find it interesting. In the previous episode, you thought Pete coming in with his "Hello, Brisco" was a great comic relief, but the gambling addiction didn't serve a comic relief purpose for you in this episode. I'm sorry. I feel like at this stage in the game where we've established that Socrates is the presidential liaison and not just some dude working for the robber barons, he's a bigger part of the trio. He's a full 33% of the trio. Whereas before he was still only about 16, with Brisco and Bowler splitting the rest. I feel like that means Socrates has to appear in some way, and it seemed like the writers were doing the angle of trying to find that comic relief. As for the quadrangle, hell, I don't even know if I called it that, but I see why you did. Again, we don't need Whip. And Dolly, I guess I'm calling her a shallow character. Like I said, she exists for the reason of, setting up the plot for this episode and being flirty and like, why don't you come up and send me some time, to Brisco to eventually be rejected because she's not Dixie.
And let me tell you, if somebody's going to pull off some Mae West shenanigans, it's going to be Dixie. Kelly Rutherford could pull that off. Dolly, not so much. Dolly comes off like a millennial in some ways compared to Dixie.
But remember, Dolly's supposed to fail, so it kind of works.
I'm just talking about my feelings for the characters themselves. As far as their purpose in the story, yeah, she works. All those criticisms fall apart when one of the best scenes in the episode, not only the series, is a daring rescue involving Brisco running on top of Comet through a freaking window. I love that scene.
That scene itself assures it's at least one Comet.
That scene itself earned itself a Comet, at the very, very least.
That's right.
That scene, and the other big one for me, is the most atypical Wild West showdown of all time. Only instead of drawn guns at high noon, it's a Godfather-esque sit-down with Enzio, replete with chairs and a table in the middle of the street. I freaking love that scene. It was very well written. Got enough jokes and parody in there to sell the tongue-in-cheek nature, but it still moves the story forward. Very, very well done. I love that scene.
I appreciated it as well, and there was still enough action in the episode to work.
You mentioned the pre-credit sequence earlier. What did you think? It's a very tiny moment, but what did you think of their reminiscing about the past Brisco County Jr. villains?
All right, Bowler, I got one for you. Who was the meanest outlaw?
Oh, Blackbeard McCut, no doubt about it. Quickest draw.
Utah Johnny Montana. All right, I got a good one. Who is the smartest? You can't count Bly, though. He was from the future.
Doc McCoy.
Okay.
The dumbest.
The
Swill brothers.
I had fun with that. And to be honest, I don't know that I agree with all of it, but that was a cool device. I really enjoyed that.
We should have, when we're done with this series, at the very end, we should take that scene and actually answer our own questions. Who is the smartest? Who's the best dressed? Does Bly count because he's from the future? I'd like to put Brisco and Bowler to the test with that.
They got Bear Claw right. That's my opinion.
Bear Paw. We kept saying Bear Claw. It turns out it's Bear Paw.
Well, dang.
Whatever. I said it right in the intro. We're fine.
See, here's the thing. I was saying Bear Claw at the time because I was on a diet at that point when we were recording, and I wanted sweets really bad. Man, listen, it's another moment where a half would probably be more appropriate. I want to give this episode a 4, but Whip Morgan keeps me from doing it. Somebody put a rotten anchovy on my pizza and kept it from being what it could have been.
So if it's 3, then somebody put a rotten, and I'm trying to figure this out with your cheese pizza thing. So you put a rotten anchovy on there. It kept it from being a 4, but it's back down to a 3. So where exactly does the cheese pizza with the rotten anchovy fall?
Because surrounding it, the other toppings are an excellent thing of pepperoni and mushrooms and pepperoncinis.
Okay. Because I you know what? I'm gonna build on that. Recently I kind of amended your cheese pizza foundation argument with a cheese pizza bagel bite. I think for a wild card, I would argue that this is a Brisco calzone.
Ooh, now that's strong, Demosthenes. Well done.
By the end of this, we're going to have an assorted menu of Italian Brisco dishes. But I digress.
Pretty appropriate considering the villains in the episode.
Exactly. I think wildcard. I think this is a pretty standard Brisco episode, but it's accented by enough inventiveness and kick-ass moments, but not really enough to distinguish itself completely from its base ingredients. It's a heartier bite, but at the end of the day, it's a folded up cheese pizza. I give it 3 as well.
I see where you're going with the calzone concept. I don't know if it's more accurate an analogy to say that it's a pan cheese pizza, but nah, I'd rather see you Photoshop his face onto a calzone. Boom. By the way, that being said, I already know what part of Bruce Campbell's face is going to be the calzone.
So join us every week as we cover all 27 episodes of The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. We invite you to watch along and let us know in the comments below what your thoughts are on each episode. And make sure to like and subscribe for more fun from Hilarity by Default.